Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now. Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. If you're enjoying these innovation insights, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Well, I am so excited. Today we have Clifton Dickens joining us. He has over 30 years of experience in the information security world. We're going to talk a lot about that today. He's known for creating practical business and security aligned solutions. And we'll talk a little bit about his background, which spans information security officer, senior IT auditor. And what I like about Clifton, when I met him, is he doesn't just talk about the tech side. He has a really cool side where he enjoys art and music. So excited to dive in today with Clifton. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Natalie. I really appreciate being here, and thanks for inviting me here to talk to all your listeners. This is great. I really appreciate the pleasure and all the pleasantries you actually said about me in that bio of mine. Now I have something to live up to. So, thank you.
Well, we met at an ISACA She Leads Tech conference. It was really, really cool just to get to hear a little bit of your backstory. It was a power packed day. We had a ton of different speakers coming up talking about different topics, but I would love for you to maybe spend just a minute or two kind of introducing some of what you talked about at that conference because I thought it was really unique.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. So again, yes, this was the She Leads Tech conference, and I thought it was very fitting where the subject was evolve. So we were actually um, everything was centered around evolution and how we evolve. And what I wanted to focus on was how I evolved. So my career path was a little bit unorthodox. It didn't follow the traditional career paths that people would take in information security and cybersecurity spaces. But I thought that because of the way that I progressed throughout my career, that it gave a bit more richness to it than if I would have gone just the traditional route, where
Mhm.
I just focused on the core items, those central fundamental things that we look at in security, the risks, the threats. But I actually got to bring a lot of my other experiences into it. Now, I've always been in technology, but I've also had passions and fulfillment outside of technology, but I was able to merge all those in together. And I actually spoke about that and my journey and how I arrived to where I am today and where I'm actually going. Yeah, it's
Well,
not over. Yeah.
you know what I liked about that talk was it's actually a picture of where the workforce is going. I think when you
Yes.
look back, maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago, you stayed in your lane, you stayed buttoned up, you talked about just the thing you were there to talk about. But I thought what was interesting was how you brought art and music and some of these other elements into who you are as a person. And I really feel like that's why the workforce today, why we're seeing this massive change and actually what people even want out of work today because they're starting to move towards the passions that they have and they're starting to look at flexibility so that they can live out some of those passions. So I just found it interesting because our world is evolving, the workforce is evolving, how people want to interact with work is evolving. And I think you spoke right to the heart of that.
Thank you. Yes, I think we celebrate a lot of people who have done things were in tech that they've created these things that didn't exist before. So having that vision, being that visionary to actually see and perceive things that aren't actually there yet. Someone had to create the first website. Someone had to. Well, we know who created the first iPhone. People created these things and we celebrate them for creating these things. So you got to have those. You should really have that ability to think outside the box, to think abstractly sometimes, and to actually say what if. I often refer back to childhood and being a child and having that childlike mind where you really
Mhm.
want to try to figure things out. And I think as adults, we get to a point where we've studied so much, we think that we know it all, but we still have to wonder why sometimes, and then try to figure it out. Yeah.
Well, let's maybe dovetail that into your experience and what you do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I feel like,
what you deal with in your world, information security, you're helping people maybe think outside the box sometimes on, um, you know, where they're going from a risk perspective, or where they're going from an organizational strategy around risk. And, most organizations are trying to figure out how to rapidly grow, but there's also this voice that has to be there to say, and as we grow, we have to scale it in a way that's going to be sustainable and secure. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about your world and how you bring some of those elements of how you think into helping leaders think about how to grow and scale, but do it in a secure way.
Okay. Good question. So, in my world, in my day to day, I often have to speak to people and not necessarily convince them of that there's potential risk. I think once I start to conduct have a dialogue with them, they will start to see the risk themselves. A lot of times, these business leaders, um, they have a particular project or an idea in mind, and they see where their end goal is, and their end goal may be something like, hey, we want to increase customer satisfaction by 15%, and that's what they're so focused on. And they look for these tools and technologies and different processes, if you will, things that will help them achieve that. But often along that line, they have their blinders on, and they don't actually see the trip hazards. They don't see where the actual risks are. So when they talk to me and they tell me about what it is that they want to do, I want the full picture. I don't want to just know what your goal is. I don't want to know just what system you're looking at or what type of data that you're handling. I want the full picture. If I get the full picture, I can tell you that here are some things that I see that could cause issues along the way. There are threats out there, and these are the potential risks that I see in each step of what it is that you're describing to me. And I help them see that. I refer back to my art background again, where I'm literally painting that picture for them. And at the end of that dialogue session, they generally see it themselves. They see themselves like, oh, I did not consider this, or I did not realize that that data contained personal information, or it did contain our proprietary information, and I don't really want that to be out there. And I help them see that. So then when I help them design controls to contain it, to mitigate from these things, these bad things from happening, they generally understand exactly why. And a lot of times they will actually propose things that they can do to keep to try to mitigate these risks. And not only am I there consulting them and helping them, but I've actually helped them learn and think for themselves a little
Yep.
bit of how I think as well. So I think that's helpful going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a strategic way to enter this topic, which I would say it's not a tactical topic. It actually is a strategic topic, but most people don't realize that. So it's like a, hey, I just need to do this, and you're actually saying, hey, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture so that we can first of all understand the why behind what we're trying to accomplish, and
Yes.
then we'll start to dig into the details. One thing I'm wondering is, like, how would you know if someone's team culture, processes, or leadership structure is fragile or vulnerable? Like, what are some of the telltale signs or the early warning signs when you're kind of looking through either a strategy that someone wants to put out there, or maybe it's not baked enough, or maybe it's already in place but it's vulnerable?
One of the ways that I do this is when I like to meet with that leader, whoever is the champion of what it is that they're doing, but I also want to meet with some of their staff. And if there's a lot of groupthink, if everybody thinks exactly the same way, to me, that's a sign that something is either they're doing that because they just want to agree with their boss. They don't want to show their boss that they disagree,
Mhm.
or they just don't have enough diversity on their team. Because I've found over my years that the best solutions usually come out of some sort of conflict. It's not conflict like people are just at each other, yelling and arguing, but there's conflict, there's differences of opinion, and we work those things out. If there's a project that's going on and there's a solution, there's something that we're trying to solve, and we have 10 people in a room, and within an hour, everything runs smoothly, and there was no contention, there was no questions, there was none of that, then to me, I feel that the leader just basically came in and just enforced what it is that they want to do. Everyone else just agreed with that person. And oftentimes these projects fail because the other 10 people were never really fully on board, or they never really fully understood what the leader wanted. They just felt that they were powerless to say anything. It wasn't their place to say anything. So if I don't see enough diversity on the team, if I don't see enough differences in opinions, if I see only people at a specific level, then I feel like that there's probably some vulnerabilities there that are going to be in that particular system. You don't really have the buy-in that you really need, and I see that a lot. I
Mhm.
truly see that a lot, where the leader will have a project or an initiative, and the team that they select are cronies, honestly.
Mhm.
I've seen that a lot when I've conducted process audits, where I've gone in and actually looked at the process and how these things came about. And I see where everyone thinks just like the leader, or they make the leader believe that they are fully on board, and it's just not enough difference in opinion to solve the problems. Yeah.
Wow. That to me, that is really powerful. A lot of times when we hear the word conflict, we immediately go to a negative place.
Yes.
And I
Mhm.
think what you're talking about here is like conflict actually surfaces truth that people maybe are trying to hide in the silence. So there may be people that don't agree with the approach, but they are told, hey, when we get in there, we just need to get this jammed through. So if you don't have anything to say that's agreement, don't say anything at all. And that's unfortunate because what we do is we create, like you said, a project or a system or a process that's doomed to fail. It's
Yeah.
actually in that conflict and in that friction that we co-create something that's better than we came in there thinking about. And so I really like your approach and even the antennas up on the approach saying, hey, if they're not pushing back, if no one has a dissenting argument or a viewpoint, if you can tell they're not doing any deep diving or creative analysis, if they're not coming up with stronger rationales or different ways of thinking on it, or even building on top of each other's comments, then something is wrong, something's off. And
Yes.
unfortunately, you're being set up to fail because you're not able to really truly voice your opinion. I once had a leader go around to everyone and tell them to back him. Back
Mm,
me,
yeah.
no matter what. And it's one of those things where you realize now you're at a crossroad. Do I really say what's true and what the organization needs to hear in order to be successful? Or do I say nothing and let this thing fail?
Yes. And too often people say nothing and let it fail, and they feel sometimes like it's not on me, it's on that person, but it is on you if you're at the table and you're not actually speaking up. We want to hear your voice, we should hear your voice. Again, I look at things, a lot of times in the artistic sense, whereby I could, there's a painting that I completed and everyone looks at it and they say, oh my God, that is so great. But what they don't know is how many strokes were wrong. They don't know how many times I chose the wrong color and I said I don't like that, and I went over, I remixed that particular color. Or if you were working on a recipe and you added cayenne and you tasted it and then you're like, oh, there's conflict there. I
Yeah.
should not have done that. And you'll improve that recipe, and then you'll have the perfect meal. You'll have the perfect recipe at the end. But in business, especially in IT, a lot of times we don't do that. We don't want the conflict, and so we try to remove it. We try to select people to be on the project team that are not going to create any conflict. And then what we do is we come out at the end with a product that is exactly the way that the leader wanted it, but the leader didn't have enough diversity on his team or her team to actually get the best product at the end.
Mhm. That's really good. I'd love to know, how you help people shift their viewpoint. It's interesting, when we hear words like governance or compliance or
Yes.
security, people like there's a feeling, right? There's kind of this energy that comes along with it. But if you really think about it, these things are strategic advantages to actually accelerate
Mhm.
your team performance, your organization's performance, and also think about, the protection of the critical data that you guys are maybe it's a competitive advantage, that data that you have that you're protecting. And so how do you get leaders of organizations to shift their thinking and not do the executive eye roll when they're excited, right, about this thing that they want to get out there in the world, but there is a little bit of a, hey, let's pause and make
Yes.
sure we have the right things in place in order to launch well.
Yes. A lot of times they can close their eyes and they can envision the castle, the great building, the skyscraper to the heavens that they want to build. And that's all they see. But they don't recognize the fact that along the way, you do need to have points where you stop and you check and assess how things are going, how you're doing. That, in essentially, is compliance because you want to make sure that things are lining up to your vision. So there are inspections that take place, whether you're building a skyscraper or you're building a deck. There's at periods where someone has to inspect it to make sure that everything is going to plan before you get to a point where you're too far gone, where it's going to cost you too much to actually go back and fix something. So when I'm talking to these leaders, I let them know that they need to embrace the compliances. The compliances are the rules that are going to make sure that their vision is actually coming out the way that it should. It's that taste test that you're going to do along the way. You need that. And governance, that's them managing that. That is them managing the chaos. That is them managing the conflict. That is them managing the compliance to make sure that things are coming along according to their plan or their vision. That's essentially what governance is. It's governing. And usually, when I explain it to them that way, and we can just whiteboard it out, and I
Mhm.
can show them, like, here, along here, this is when you need to check in to make sure that they're doing this. This is when you need to run some sort of, whether it's a user acceptance test or whatever. This is the point that you would do this. This is the point when you bring in the IT security people to do a vulnerability scan and identify where the flaws are. This is where you check the code, and those are compliances, and what they're doing is they're managing it, whether they're doing it directly or they bring in someone else, a project manager, to do it. They're still going to meet with that and be part of that process. And once I explain it to them that way, they don't start to see governance as this forked tongue, horn wearing beast that's coming for them. They don't see compliance as, a team of lawyers that just bombard their office and just start throwing, documents and things at them saying, fill out this, where is that. They usually embrace it, and they champion it even more, like, yes, I am the leader, I am in
Mhm.
charge, I do want to make sure that this is going right. So yes, I am going to make sure that we have a good governance model in what it is that we're doing. Yeah.
It's there's a couple things you said there that I think are really interesting. You know, done right, governance actually builds confidence, and I think
Yes.
that that's part of what you're talking about there is actually we have a confident approach, that we know the foundation is stable and safe that we can now build on, and there's a predictability in that that actually enables them to go faster, not slower. And I think when
Agreed.
those governance pieces are in place, it actually creates the speed that they want to bring things to market. And so, um, you know, oftentimes people don't build that in for many, many, many years. And then the reason I think sometimes it's really heavy is because they're having to go back and build that foundation that was never built before.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Great way of looking at it. Yes.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I would love to talk a little bit about is, when you're thinking about helping an organization scale well, how do you help leaders think about, building in that accountability? So, you talked a little bit about that under governance, but maybe like what could a light version of that look like where you're building in those that either that strong foundation or maybe it's stage gates or just some form of accountability where it transitions from, oh, those people over there own it to, no, I actually own the governance and I need to be thinking about this every day when I wake up as well.
Yes. I always like to start with the organization. So a lot of times we look at where we sit, where our office is, where we're located within the organization, and people say, hey, all I have to do is just come to work and do my job, and that's it. And we really need to look at it from the top down. What is the organization doing? What do we do? And then work our way down to what it is that we do to contribute to that. And that's the part that we can control, but at least we know what we're controlling, where it's going. We know the direction to steer it. So we definitely need processes. So once you know exactly where you are and where you're going, what your efforts and your task, where your labor goes into and the direction that it's going, the overall outcome, you can create processes, and in those processes, that's where you have a little bit of control. That's where you can, as a leader, you can make sure that you insert the accountability for your team because you've documented it, you've stepped it out. What I generally do with my team is periodically I would just re-engineer processes where I would have everyone come in, and I would, before the meeting, I would have a specific task, and I say, okay, when we are reviewing technology contracts, I want, my team to document what it is that they do, steps that they follow, and we're going to talk about them. And then what happens is we'll have one person who's talking about it, and there's a particular step that they do, which is a very good point, a very good piece. But two other people don't do that at all. And they
Mm.
turn to them and they said, I never thought to do that. That is very good. Why don't I do that? And that's how we build best practices within our team. Once we have these processes, we'll get together again and we will tabletop it. It only takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but every year we will tabletop our processes to make sure that our processes are still applicable. Because a lot of times the systems change, the players change, the organization may have restructured, done a few little restructuring along the way. We've had people that retire that took a lot of knowledge with them out of the
Mhm.
organization. So because we know what we control, and we have our processes documented and we know where they're going, then we can actually map out and we can find those points along the way whereby we may need to make adjustments to our processes here because there was a departmental change further up the line, or there was a loss of resources further up the line. And then we can make sure that, we're still reaching that overall goal, that objective that the organization needs us to do. So no process is too small because we know, when we're laying that brick and we say, hey, all I'm doing, I'm laying these bricks, I'm stacking them up, but it's going to be this beautiful cathedral when I finish, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
but
amazing.
I need to make sure that I lay them straight so that
Yeah.
the cathedral is as beautiful as it should be. Yeah.
Well, I want to introduce maybe a term called CMMI, which
Hmm.
stands for, I think it's capability maturity model
Maturity model. Yeah.
integration. I think I always want to say index, but I think it's integration. But
Mhm.
one of the things that you're talking about here is the fact that, most organizations kind of operate at a level one, which is ad hoc,
Mhm.
unpredictable, reactive. Once a problem comes to me, I will in the moment figure out how to react to it. If that problem comes to 10 different people, they're going to react 10 different ways. And
Right.
and I love what you talked about with the process of saying, "Hey, we're going to sit at the table together and design this together." And as they're hearing someone else design it, they're like, "Oh, I don't do that, but I should be doing that." And to me, that's the beauty of moving from like that level 1 very reactive to starting to build in some disciplines into the organization to where if you have 10 people running a process, instead of everyone doing it 10 different ways, we all have one way to run that process. And then if we find a better way, we're updating the process. We're not building it around personalities and people. We're building it around a standardized way of doing things so that everyone knows how to do it. Well, what I know we're almost out of time here, but like what final thoughts would you have for our listeners as they think about their own postures? They think about how to strengthen their own organization or maybe even how to prioritize. Maybe as they're listening to you, they're like, "Oh, we don't have processes documented. We don't know how we would respond in the case of a hacker, attacker, or bad actor." Like, their head might be spinning right now. So where could they
Yeah.
start to begin to make sure the foundation is built and then build on it?
So for processes, I would definitely say for anyone who does not have processes, if you're a leader, you really need to pull your team together and look at your core functions and have your team work together to develop those processes. Don't dictate to them what the process will be, because you need their buy-in. They need to feel comfortable with what it is that they're doing, or they're really not going to do it, or they're just going to go to doing it their way anyway. But their way may be better than what you can suggest, because again, they're the ones that are actually performing the task. But you really need to document those processes and make it a group activity. Don't sit alone. Don't just pull just a few people that you feel are not going to give you any kind of conflict, that are just going to go right along with what you say, and say, hey, we're going to have a planning session and we're going to whiteboard it out, and all they're going to do is just agree with you and say, yep, boss, I like it, it works. And then you're going to give it to the rest of your team and it's not going to work. So make sure that you have that diversity on your team. Intentionally pick people that are difficult to work with sometimes,
Mhm.
because that's going to be an example of, there's a population of people who are going to be like that. They represent a population. It might be 10% of your organization that may be difficult to work with from time to time. So you need someone like that on your team. Don't go to them and tap 'em on the shoulder and say, I don't like you, you don't like me, therefore I want you on my team. But you know who they are, and introduce people that will give you some tough questions. So when it comes down to designing processes, I will say that, and I have to again go back to diversity, because I think a lot of our problems that we encounter are because of the lack of diversity, because
Mhm.
we feel that diversity is something that causes strife, that causes issues. So we all want to feel safe and we want to be comfortable, we want things to be predictable. So as people, it's in our nature to try to introduce only those things around us that's going to make us feel comfortable. And if it's people that went to the same college that we did, the people that lived in the same neighborhood that we do, or people that have the same degrees that I do, we just get those people around us, then of course you might feel more comfortable, but you're not producing a good product at the end, because you're this percentage of people, but you're developing a product that has to work for 100% of the organization, but you're not getting the other 90% of the thoughts and ideas into that particular product. So diversify your staff, diversify your teams, your project teams, your initiatives, everything. Make sure that you're putting some diversity in there. Uh,
Wow. That's so powerful. Where can people find and follow you?
People can find and follow me on LinkedIn. I pretty much, that is my social media of choice. So I'm on LinkedIn, Clifton Dickens. Very easy to find. But definitely that's the social media of choice for me, is LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome. Go check out Clifton. Great thought leader in this space. You will enjoy hitting follow for Clifton. And Clifton, thank you for joining us today. This was an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed having you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I hope I was a pleasure to all of your listeners.
Absolutely. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.